This is Robert Mardlacci, the MindShare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech, in conversation with EdTech futurist Dwayne Matthews on the future of AI in education. Thank you for joining me today, Dwayne.
Thank you very much for having me, Robert.
Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And a little bit about Dwayne Matthews. He is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Innovation at OVS. He's a keynote speaker, innovation evangelist, and future of education strategist. Dwayne helps governments, school boards, independent schools, educators, parents, and students understand and create transformational opportunities for the future of education and work. Future of Education segments, expert on Canada's National Breakfast Show, CTV's Your Morning, and the Marilyn Dennis Show. Dwayne is a proud dad and former educator at my alma mater, the Toronto District School Board. He was just recently authored in a new book on ChatGPT. And wow, you are staying at the forefront of innovation, my friend.
Gosh, and you know what? It's moving really, really fast. It's moving really, really fast. I feel like I'm on a surfboard with a really giant wave off the coast of Portugal. It's a pretty fast moving wave. It's a very, very exciting time. There's a significant amount of risk, and there's a significant amount of opportunity to do something extraordinary. And I'm radically optimistic about the possibilities.
So tell me, how would you, and it's all about relatability, how would you compare or contrast the last big wave of innovation that we've seen in our history? Was it the internet or was it Google? I think it's a little beyond Google, but was it when the advent of the internet, perhaps?
You know, at the very beginning, I really did think that, I'm probably on record saying, hey, this is like 1994, when we saw the internet for the first time. But I think this is a little bit more like around the turn of the century, when we got electricity, we got cars, we had this convergence. And so today we have a convergence. We have computer processing and storage. We have the ability to make semiconductor chips. I was just reading a little bit about how precise that is. A speck of dust can, cost millions and millions of dollars, and they have to throw all the chips out. It's quite fascinating. That with AI, with augmented reality, mixed reality, and mobile devices all converging at once. And, we have an extraordinary capability that is probably significantly further along than most people, including the creators of AI, thought. And so we're really having to sit back and think about, what does that mean for economy? If you can remember, when we had that convergence in the past, in 1820, 12% of all the humans that we could count could read. 98% were on the farm. Today, in Western countries, about 87% can read, and only 2% are on the farm. And our challenge in Western countries is not no food, it's too much food. We decided to move off the farm, and we created the economy around us. And so we don't know what's coming next. We're thinking about what we have now, but I think that we may go through a pretty significant transformation, and we get an opportunity to think really hard about, how do we help to guide that?
Fascinating. Thank you for that. So we resorted to ChatGPT for questions to ask you here this afternoon, Dwayne. I mean, what more logical thing could we have done? And so not to throw any curveballs at you, but here we go. So the first question that emerged is, how do you envision AI shaping the future of education, and what specific areas or aspects of education do you believe will benefit the most from AI integration? How's that for a loaded question?
Sure, that's a pretty loaded question. And what's interesting, there was a new generative AI platform that came out just today actually would respond to questions live. Unfortunately for me, I didn't download it. It's almost like a teleprompter, but perhaps maybe the next time we can have your GPT talk to my GPT, and you and I can go and have a coffee.
And we can go take and soak up the great sunshine outside.
Yeah.
Do the work.
So in terms of the impact, I think one of the biggest places that we're going to see impact is efficiency. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about our education system, we have a Prussian model, and the Prussian model has basically been responsible for a large part of the transformation that we have. I mean, there are a few other key pieces, like energy is a significant one, food production is a significant one, but the ability to transform our economy is really based on school. Now, if we look at school and we measure school in terms of a key performance indicator or success, one of the key things that we would look at is post-secondary education. And most countries around the world, most quote unquote developed countries around the world, have a 30% post-secondary educated population. Canada is significantly higher at 50%. But 50%, if that's the measure of success, is not incredibly high. And a reason for that is not a problem with teachers, it's the form of the system itself. The way that you are supposed to learn, it really sort of leans into a certain way or a certain type of outcome that's not personalized. What AI creates an opportunity for is a very personalized way of education in terms of the content created and in terms of the way that we can assess and see what students are doing, and in terms of the way that we can make these things engaging and shift time. And I think that's really profound. If we were able to increase the proficiency of education from, let's say, 30% to 60%, that would be quite profound. The other is, I think there's really an opportunity, and I know Sal Khan talks about this, but creating an AI tutor that can sort of develop along with the student, and that tutor can really think about where are the things that you're missing. For example, if I'm in class and I'm speaking or a teacher's speaking, I might drift off and start thinking about, should Robert be playing for the Leafs next year? And in 10, 15 minutes, I may come back and I might not have heard a word that the teacher said. But now having these sorts of AI tools and tutors, we can really find where the gaps are and we can fill those gaps. So that's one of the ways in terms of present system. In terms of future system, we can have a lot more complex things that we can learn. I'll give an example. My son has a project, and I said, it's a passion project. I said, why don't you create a video game? He doesn't know how to code. I don't know how to code. But he went and found a Unity platform. He's connected to GPT-4, and all of a sudden he has a significantly huge advantage that he did not have before GPT-4, and he was able to start creating things in a weekend, something that should have taken him months to do. And so I think we have an opportunity to start looking at much more complex and much more rich learning experiences. And I think that's something that I think that I'm probably a little bit more excited about. So we have today, right? What we need to do today, the requirements of today, but we also have really pushing the envelope on what we're capable to do tomorrow. And then the last point that I'd like to make is mental health. As kids, kids sit in class for 6 hours a day, taking in instruction. With that increased efficiency, I bet we could free up a significant amount of time to have students really focus on things like relationship building, focus on collaborative learning, focus on developing those interpersonal skills that are critical and important, and that really assist with mental health and mental fitness. And I think that's a massive, massive opportunity. I think I've lost your sound, Robert. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Well done, Dwayne. Perhaps I'll add to the conversation with a recent post from another legend in EdTech, Alacoros from the University of Regina, and
Brilliant guy.
he shared some additional thoughts on how students are leveraging ChatGPT, whether it's for personalized learning or tutoring, which you referenced, research and assistance, assignment outlines, personalized feedback on assignments, study or exam prep, budgeting and finance, time management, language learning, mental health and counseling, which you referenced, and career guidance. So it's really wide ranging. It's an open palette, if you will, isn't it? It's just, really understanding how to interface with the technology. As a famous theorist from the University of Toronto once said, "We create the technology, and the technology shapes us." And there's a real threat there, isn't there? And you referenced some recent concerns expressed by very notable folks in tech.
Yeah, no, I mean, just recently, as a few hours ago, the CEO of OpenAI, along with a lot of senior people at Google, Professor Jeffrey Hinton from the University of Toronto, and these are all, godfathers, creators, if you will, of artificial intelligence. These are, definitely not people on the outside. They're very much on the inside. They see a lot more of what's coming that we can't see as yet. And the warning was existential threat at the same level
Wow.
of a pandemic and the same level of a nuclear threat. And, some of the components to that, I think, are things like misinformation, right? There was a few days ago, there was a picture that showed an explosion at the Pentagon that was AI generated. It was a fake picture, but it created a significant amount of confusion. I think the threat of misinformation has always been a human problem. From as far back as Galileo, to the witch hunts, to think of social media. So the threat of misinformation has always been huge. What's different is that it's democratized in a significantly larger way than, let's say, social media was, and there's significant threats around that. The other is not necessarily thinking so much about today, but thinking about GPTs or AIs in the future. And what would they be able to do in the future if no one's paying attention? So not today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if we have certain existential risks, we have an AI planning, over a long horizon. These kinds of things are quite significant, and they're quite challenging. And I think a big piece is we also really have to realize at this moment that there's something being created with our data, with what we put in. And so we have to get a lot more thoughtful about what we put in. Very much like I have to be thoughtful when I speak in front of my children. We have to get a lot more thoughtful about what is going in to train these different models. And so I think those are very, very important questions that we have to solve and we have to sort out quickly.
Thank you so much for that, Dwayne. Now, talk to me about the increasingly, as AI becomes prevalent in classrooms, what potential challenges or concerns do you foresee in terms of student privacy and data security? How can these challenges be effectively addressed?
So I think, and I could be wrong here, but one of the opportunities that I think is we're going to start to see walled gardens. I'll give you an example. In Korea, for example, they've said by 2025, all textbook companies have to embed AI in their digital textbooks. Now, if they're doing that, they're going to put a wall garden around their digital textbooks. We see that JP Morgan is creating what's called Index GPT for JP Morgan. Bloomberg has done it. As a matter of fact, Microsoft came out a few weeks ago and said, we're actually going to give you the tools to build your own GPT around your proprietary information. And so where I think the opportunity is there is really thinking about where do you opt in and how do you opt in and what gets left off the table versus everything being in. So right now, the internet is a great big soup. There's lots of value in there and there's a significant amount of noise. I think this creates an opportunity to start really sort of refining the noise that's out there and going in and saying, hey, I'm in this GPT model. I'm over at JP Morgan because I trust JP Morgan and I trust the information that they have, or I'm over here at Bloomberg or this particular textbook company. I think these are the opportunities. And I think we have a lot of opportunity for privacy to be addressed in those scenarios. I know,
Right.
for example, right now that OpenAI is there's a probe at the provincial levels looking at how they've dealt with privacy. The other piece that I think is sort of a sleeper here is our data has been used to create value for the Googles, the Facebooks, in the billions of dollars. Our data gets sold back and forth. There are hundreds of points of data. And we didn't really have an opportunity to defend against that in the past. We do have an opportunity to revisit that today and to opt into things like, if my data is creating billions of dollars of value, then A, I should be able to opt in, but B, I should also be able to profit share in that, because that essentially is work. I am working.
Well said.
And, so I think there's an opportunity for us to offset some of the job loss by ownership and having ownership in terms of the profit and the shares. And I think that should definitely be a part of the conversation that, we should pursue now. And definitely I would tell the students that they should definitely pursue it. Probably
Well,
even more
yeah,
now.
no, fascinating. And, you had the New York School District, or New York State for that matter, ban ChatGPT and which, they're not ready for it. So why introduce something that they haven't fully understood? So talk to me about your opinion around what is the role of the human teachers. What do they play in an AI-driven educational landscape, and how can AI and human instructors collaborate, creating the most effective learning experiences? I just heard this morning it was, I believe it was the CEO of NVIDIA that was talking about programmers collaborating with AI programmers. So much the same thinking here. That was a question that emerged from ChatGPT, by the way.
I think one of the key pieces is that it sped up the conversation that we've been having for a long time, right? So we started having a conversation a while ago about teacher as facilitator, teacher as relationship builder, teacher as coach. And it's taken a while for that to come. We still have, inertia where a lot of people, parents, students, other teachers think that the teacher holds all the information, right? I've was an author on a book that's 1,000 pages big, and we put that book together in December, and a lot of the information in the book is outdated, and it's June, right? So in less than 6 months, the information is moving so fast. So the expert can no longer be the expert. So I think it pushes the idea of teacher being relationship builder, teacher being facilitator, teacher connecting ideas and finding opportunities for interest and passion. It actually gives teachers back time to do precisely what most teachers wanted to do when they started, which was to help little humans become great humans. And in that process, a lot of teachers have gotten bogged down with trying to figure out assessments and that sort of stuff. I think now we can look at insights, we can look at relationship, and we can start to think about things like that are very human, ethics, things like mental frameworks, and really get into that kind of piece. And last but not least, I say to a lot of people, CDs came along, HD came along, we still go to concerts, right? And if you think about that, we go to concerts for a very specific reason, for the human experience. We go for the imperfection, right? We go to be together. And I think if we look at this right, we may find more opportunities to be together and to create these intentional social interactions versus having these social interactions be on the sideline. So I really think in terms of mental health, this is a massive, massive opportunity.
Well, and it's about building community, right? Yesterday, I was up at York University for the Odessa conference. So there were EdTech professors from across the country, primarily from faculties of education. And we were sitting in a circle. I said, this is reminiscent of Dr. Margaret Ryle and her learning circles theory that we had at Pepperdine. And one of the profs looked at me, had no idea what I was talking about, and really came to appreciate the value of sitting in no technology, having a conversation, and we sat there for 2 hours. When do you get to do that?
Right.
And the informal deep learning and exchange was fascinating. So there is a place.
It's like a flipped classroom on steroids, right? Like,
yeah,
you, as much as, and we all just recently experienced this, right? We all recently experienced it. We were on Zoom. Zoom works fantastic. You and I are speaking right now, but there is something about us sitting down and having a meal together, just being in each other's company for a few hours. And I think right now we have 6 hours in a day for school. What if we could get through all that content in 2 hours? What could we do with the other 4? Right? What could we do with the other 4? So I think we really need to start not thinking about, hey, how does this affect our 6-hour form? But what could we do if we had more time, specifically around intentional social interactions? How much more well-adjusted could we all be, right? If we had that. So I think there's a real great opportunity there. And I really hope that we just dive in and take that opportunity.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And let's explore the next question from ChatGPT. How can AI be utilized to personalize education and cater to the unique needs and learning styles of individual students? What are some of the innovative ways which AI can adapt instructional content and deliver to optimize student engagement and achievement? Wow, that's a pretty loaded and fascinating question, because we are constantly talking about personalization, but we haven't fully realized the potential, have we?
No, and so here's why. Much of the content is driven to a group, right? So if you think of any content that you have, a study came out and says there's a study that if you eat like this, you're going to get like this. Well, you weren't in the study, right? So really what would be better is if the study was on Robert specifically and on Dwayne specifically, and the results that we got from that was for us. That's not scalable. At least it wasn't yesterday. In terms of today, with AI, that starts to become more scalable. So I'll give you an example. We're working on a writing project where we're using a platform called Scribo AI. And one of the things that we're able to do is to have students write every day. And they write every day based on things that they're interested in. And so that's like 30 students, 30 different topics every single day, but the teacher's able to see insights on each individual student. They're able to see word choice. They're able to see grammar. They're able to see spelling. They're able to see the way that they're phrasing. They're able to look and see how they're writing and how they're thinking all in real time. And that's quite profound, because they can now create feedback for each individual student at scale, something that you couldn't do before. When I was a teacher in a classroom and I had my kids writing a 5-paragraph essay, it would take me at least 4 or 5 days to get through everybody's essay. And by the time I hand it back, the student at 10 or 11, they've forgotten what they wrote. They're not reading my feedback. So it's a missed opportunity. But being able to get that feedback in real time is huge. And the pilot that we have, the students really, really like that. They like the fact that I could get this feedback right away. It's instant, but the things that I'm writing about are topics that I care about, not what the teacher thought was interesting. But one person's interested in cars, one person's interested in painting, one person's interested in something else, and tomorrow it's a whole new thing. But being able to do that at scale and personalize that way, that's actually quite significant, because you're finding you're going to reach way more students right where they are versus where you think the class should be.
Well said, Dwayne. And our last ChatGPT generated question, number 5. With AI algorithms becoming more sophisticated, there is a growing concern about bias and discrimination in educational AI systems. How can we ensure that AI in education remains fair and unbiased? And what steps should we be taking to address any potential bias that may arise?
So there's
Great
a few
question.
things. I think one is really honing in on critical thinking and first principles thinking. That's key. Being able to see it, being able to see the biases, being able to know that you need to be looking for these biases, I think is a critical opportunity. You and I, we were taught that what we were taught was true, right?
Hmm.
My parents, they were taught that what they saw on the news was true. Today, we start to realize, a lot of that really has an opinion. It's a position. And in terms of what's actually the facts and what's actually opinions, it's a little bit harder to pull out. So I think that's the first thing. The other is, I think more students need to get involved in AI in terms of creating these little wall gardens that I talked about. Having these GPT models that are specifically designed to offset some of those challenges, I think is really, really important. And then the third, I think, is there is a construct or concept called algorithmic nudging. And I think everyone needs to know what this is. Everyone needs to get very, very familiar with it. So, in layman's terms, it's essentially, as you start to interact with the web, because the web is a place where it's an economy of attention, you start to get certain things that are connected to what you've been interacting with. And slowly but surely, you end up in a really small myopic space. And the algorithm keeps on nudging. You can see this with your YouTube or maybe your Facebook. And I think that is probably one of the scariest things for me, is algorithmic nudging. And so I think it's very important that we get a sense of what that is now, so we can feel when that's coming at us, right? Like, I'll give you an example. I was asking my son, I was so concerned. Snapchat has an AI that pretends to be like a friend, and it's all
I
kinds.
heard about this. That was very controversial.
Yeah. It pretends like it's a friend. And so I'm having this conversation with my son, who's quite young, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, yeah, he goes, me and my friends, because we tried that out, it doesn't really feel real. It feels like it's trying to push in a direction, so we don't use it. And it was so quick that he was able to slice through very quickly. And I think being able to really focus our children around cyber hygiene, that kind of cyber awareness, learning about these things and learning about these techniques is really, really important. It has always been important, but I think today it's significantly more important. And the risk of AI presents the opportunity for us to revisit that. A lot of the challenges that we've had politically are driven by financial realities, but financial realities usually create these huge extremes And these huge extremes, we find algorithmic nudging becomes a really, really interesting tool to manipulate people left, right, or whichever way. And I think being able to know that, hey, listen, I understand a little bit about algorithmic nudging, I understand a little bit about first principles thinking, so I can at least try to get to the core of something where I do some real thinking. I'll give you a quick example. I had a person that I know came and said, "Hey, I'd like my child to get into a particular career. I won't say what it is because that takes away from the point." And one career was ranked socially very high, and one career was not ranked socially as high. One was post-secondary, one you didn't require post-secondary. And I said, why? I said, oh, because this one pays more. We looked up really quickly the average pay, they were the same, right?
Interesting.
So he had a whole theory about why his children should go into, he made a whole decision on his kids going to school, where they were going to go based on a piece of information or a premise that was incorrect. And so I think we really want to get into asking ourselves, how do we know this to be true? And how can I prove it to be true? And do I need to prove it or not? Does it help me in my goals and what I'd like to do with life?
Well, fascinating conversation. We're at the forefront of this right now. And, what is the role of faculties of education for that matter in preparing educators? They have a responsibility as well to, in-service and pre-service teachers need to know.
So the first thing that I would say is come the end of June, everybody get some rest. Everybody get some rest. Turn off, unplug, get some rest. Come the beginning of August,
Right.
everybody is going to need to pick this back up with a kind of urgency because the world is moving very quickly. I had some folks ask me, they're like, should we ban this from schools? I said, Microsoft is putting a co-pilot on every single thing that they have in Microsoft 365, right? Word, Excel, Azure, everything.
Yeah.
And Google came out and said, we're putting it, they're calling it Duet on every single tool that they have. Both are giving the opportunity for people to build their own. It's on the search engines. It's going to be on Google's search engine in a few months. It's already on Microsoft's search engine. Financial advisors, ad agencies, this is going to be everywhere. And it is going to have a profound shift in terms of what comes next. And I think it's important that faculty start thinking about what's the policy, what's beyond the form factor of school today. And I think there are ways to do that. So I would break it up into two. What do we do about today? Who's in that team? And what do we do about tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the day after that? And have those two teams go out into the world and make the most sense of the information that they have to push this forward.
Well said, Dwayne. But before folks rest up at the end of June, we do have an EdTech meetup that we're planning. And lo and behold, you'll be presenting as well. Thank you for agreeing to join us on June 20th here at the Mindshare Workspace in Air Mills Town Center in the great city of Mississauga, as former Mayor Hazel McCallion used to say. So we're going to meet this head on, and we have experts like yourself, Dr. Ron Ouston, former Dean of Education from York University, and Diana Barbosa, who is a cyber security expert. Will be taking a deep dive along with you and Ron and myself, and some 500 industry folks who are in this space are welcome to join us, as well as educators, and really, have a collegial conversation about the true value and how we interface with it. Final thoughts to share?
Thank you very much. If you are in Toronto, I am doing a keynote at Tenenbaum Chat, which is a pretty big community school in the center of Toronto. So that's tomorrow. Look on my LinkedIn. I'll put a link there. If you're interested in coming, you can register or send me a DM. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you on the 20th, Robert.
Thank you so much. A shout out to Ivana Zelich for asking us a question on AI in education, and Jolene Levin for her comment on the importance of working collectively to embrace AI in the future learning strategies. Always great to connect with those folks. And with that, this concludes our MindShareTV podcast with Dwayne Matthews, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Innovation at OVS, keynote speaker, innovation evangelist, and future of education strategist. My name is Robert Merdlanchi, the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindsharelearning.com and be sure to watch for tomorrow's top 10 issue that will be released incorporating this chat. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.